appearance on Tinfoil Hat, and that was one of my source materials for my research.
Oh right, yeah. I was watching it last night. I was like, sorry, the sound cut out a few times, but yeah, I guess you probably get a bunch of people asking about Crowley because of the tinfoil thing. So
Yeah, definitely the most exposure I've ever gotten. I think Crowley might have had something to do with that, with his own kind of energy.
we'll see how it takes here. But what I'll be doing is do a quick introduction, and then I'll just ask for like maybe a TV guide summary of the documentary from you.
Cool.
And from there we'll just see where it rolls. So okay, and I think yes, I am recording, so I'll just do a clap for my own visual thing. Welcome to Aural Hygiene. This is the podcast where we talk about educational films, experimental films, caught films, and interesting documentaries. We're looking at the most interesting of documentaries today. This is Matt. With me today are Mark and Jay from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Hello, guys.
What's up? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining in. I definitely like your recording space, Mark. I don't have Jay's picture, but mine's real boring. I finally today I put up the Zoot Cat poster just so it wouldn't look like completely depressing. And my computer, it's too.
Yeah, mine's overwhelming, but it's not intentional. I had this background way before I ever thought I'd be on podcasting.
Yeah, I've had places that looked that cool, but it was like with roommates, and it was because of the roommate, not because of me. So,
but interesting.
Today's movie, of course, is The Wickedest Man in the World. It's a 2003, I believe, BBC documentary about Aleister Crowley, whatever you want to call him. I stick with that unholy Crowley thing most of the time, so because we all write terrible poetry when we're in our teens. So,
no, Mark, and that is correct. I believe a couple historians who have biographied him use that word as a rhyme. Like, yeah, this is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. But Mark, could you give us like the TV guide rundown of what we're seeing here?
Right. So this film is sort of an okay job at encompassing his life. They did a pretty good job of finding like some old audio clips of Aleister Crowley actually speaking. But for the most part, I would say it's not the best portrayal, or at least not the most accurate portrayal of him and his life. They kind of hit on the major points and the turning points in his life. But I think the real merit of the documentary itself is in the source material that they use, like the old pictures that they found that I don't think I've seen in a search engine. So they must have taken those from, some museum or library or some collection somewhere. And then, of course, the audio files to hear Aleister Crowley actually like reading out an incantation or a evocation or whatever ritual he was doing. It's chilling if you have this kind of impression of him that the documentary is trying to give, and that is kind of just half the story really, but it's fascinating in the sense of like what it brings visually and auditorially as far as old content and mixing it with the narrative. I didn't really like the the main guy that was featured. Maybe just his opinion on Crowley. He seemed like a little bit of a fanboy, but yeah, it was definitely interesting documentary.
Well, it's oh no, I'm 42, so I had a fair amount of pre-internet time. And it's interesting how Crowley just sort of like seeps into your life, like you barely know who this guy is for a while. I mean, it's mostly rock and roll. You got Ozzy Osbourne singing Mr. Crowley, and then who's this weird guy on the Sgt. Pepper album cover, that sort of thing. So then so I think the doc was important in that it was like a good populist way for everyone to sort of understand, at least a light understanding, because love him or hate him, he was a relatively major figure of the early 20th century when everything's said and done, possibly opening up the age of Horus again, for better or for worse.
Now, I do think they pointed out the Syphilu incident in the documentary. Am I
climbing one? Is it?
No, the one in Italy where
Oh,
he
right.
so maybe I should retract what I said before, because I think this is one of the documentaries or pieces of commentary on Crowley's life that leads you to believe that maybe he was more evil than he was, but then they also kind of take it back a little bit at some points with like that one guy who seemed like I said was a little bit of a fanboy. But in my opinion, Aleister Crowley's life was so detailed and just like spanned the globe. Literally, he traveled all over the world, and he interacted with so many people that there's no way that documentary at that length could have fit all of this information. And I, as somebody who did that interview on Tinfoil Hat and several other interviews, nothing quite like the Tinfoil Hat one. That was kind of an attempt at giving a synopsis of his life. But I think there is just so much to touch on that happened in his life that you couldn't fit it all in a documentary. Like they left out the part about Jack the Ripper. I mean, that's an important part of his life where he, had sex with this woman, a maid, in his parents' home. He was caught. The maid was fired. The maid became a prostitute. The maid ended up becoming one of Jack the Ripper's victims. And then later in life, Aleister Crowley, as a kind of older man, runs into Jack the Ripper, shares this story with him, makes the connection, allegedly, and then receives this sort of totem, a murder totem. I don't know any other way to describe it, but he receives this disgusting bloody rag, from Jack the Ripper. And I apparently kept that for some time. I don't know if he had it with him his whole life, but that's a story he tells. It could be his own exaggeration to play up that moniker of the wickedest man in the world. He certainly liked to portray himself that way. It was his response to the strict Christian upbringing. I mean, the type of Christianity that his parents were involved with is not run of the mill by any means. It's pretty strict. There's very chaste. They don't condone a lot of kind of emotional connection that makes a family strong. So I think Alistair grew up in a really rigid, strict, unloving environment in some sense, but he was also privileged. He had wealth because of his father's passing. I believe it was his father, his grandfather, possibly, but he inherited a bunch of wealth around the time when he became 19, 20, around that age. And he just started traveling the world and getting into spiritualism, kind of like the story of Buddha, like this rich guy who realizes, like, oh, there's more to life than what I can buy. And that's what he became. But I think the fact is that he never, he never quite conquered his own sexual weakness, in the sense that he had this really untempered sexual desire that colored a lot of his magical workings. And the biggest part, something that Jay and we actually just interviewed Joe Roop from Fringe FM, and that's something he taught me about. He actually is an initiate of the Golden Dawn as well. Aleister Crowley, that's the first order that he ever joined into to kind of get familiar with the magical arts. He learned, as much as he could, and then he realized, like, I need to start my own thing because these people aren't doing it right, you know. And that's when the kind of fall into this sort of fall from grace, so to speak. Not that he was ever graceful, but I feel like his spiritual potential became dimmer and dimmer the more he fed that lust. And that's why he became associated with characters like Kenneth Anger and, this kind of sinful Hollywood environment that he later in life kind of influenced in some way or another. And that's why he was so potent in pop culture. And you heard Ozzy Osbourne and you saw the Beatles cover. I mean, the Beatles cover portrays it perfectly. Aleister Crowley belongs in that group because he was someone who interacted with so many people, and I don't think they even touched on that in the documentary. The fact that he, knew Ian Fleming, he knew Aldous Huxley, he knew L. Ron Hubbard, he knew Kenneth Anger, obviously, he knew, all of these different weird occult magicians that most people will never really learn about because they don't choose to go down this path of understanding. But Aleister Crowley was a magnanimous person. He really lived a life that was larger than life, in the sense of like he traveled the world. He was a mover and shaker in the time when people kind of did that by the seat of their own pants and with a backpack over their back. Like when he was traveling around, it was trains and boats. It wasn't like really planes yet. By the time planes and that kind of thing came about, he was already pretty old, and then died drug addicted. And that's something people talk about a lot, is like his opium addiction. His book uh, Confessions of an Opium Addict, something along that line. That's like one of them. Or Confessions of a Drug Addict, is it? I don't remember. Drug Fiend. That's one of the most popular books by him, because of its kind of I would say nihilistic, but also mystical, but also hopeless, but also kind of edgy, because it's drug related. And that's why he's kind of floated amongst the uh, fringe scene for such a long time. But it's also kind of like a gothy kind of, I want to be black magic cool and do Satan rituals. Like those people are fascinated with him. That's not me at all. I completely came to learn about Crowley from a spiritual lens. And then as I got more into podcast, I realized like, oh wow, this guy's not that great. And then some people were talking about him like he's this rock star. And that's why I ultimately resolved to talk about Aleister Crowley when I was given the opportunity to go on Tinfoil Hat.
Yeah, the thing I kind of felt missing from this documentary on my end, the last, I'm gonna forget in our book title, but I read a book a few years ago, really focusing on sort of his the espionage angle. The movie
Right.
glosses over it. They're just like, oh, he decided to work for the Germans, which is a super gloss over.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
book
Secret
kind of,
Agent 666 by Richard Spence is one book that I know definitely.
that's it.
Yeah, it talks a lot about his connections, and he was actually, on the Lusitania a week before it sank. And if for those who aren't familiar with the history of World War One or World War Two, the Lusitania was sunk, in order to, it was a false flag, right? And that was kind of the impetus for America to come and fight the Germans,
Yeah,
was Lusitania.
we were just talking here a week or two ago about you know, well, JP Morgan deciding he's sick the day the Titanic set sail. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I think maybe it was the British. They were trying to stoke the British. I don't remember it, but well, he was working for England, so yeah, it must have been they were trying to get the Americans to fight. But people can correct me whether it was World War One or two that the Lusitania was involved with. But that was, yeah, really interesting that he was involved with that. But then, as you see, the CIA, Hollywood kind of have this connection. And where was he later in life? He was traveling around America. He went to California. He was in Mexico even too. I mean, he was in Mexico long enough to like become Freemason within the Mexican Freemason groups. And that's where he kind of got this fascination with psychedelic drugs, peyote and marijuana. And I'm sure he interacted with drugs before that, but that was a big fundamental change in his life, was when he began to become more interested in drugs. And because he was a mountaineer, that's why he traveled so much, and that's where the spiritual perspective came from, was like going up on top of the tallest mountain and challenging himself to do that. I think that's where a lot of the enlightenment happened for him. But as he kind of delved further into magic, it was you know more material things. And he was so popular in the sense of like he had this charm, because he worked on his mental, spiritual, physical capacities to be that position. And I think that's what made him indispensable as an espionage agent: his ability to charm people, his ability to, convey wisdom that made him seem like he had all this like knowledge and esoteric knowledge. Like, that's something that A is very compelling to people, and B goes hand in hand with espionage. Secret societies and espionage are hand in hand. I mean, the first spies, were of certain secret orders. The history is varied, but even in the East, the West, secret societies, spies, this is a tool of government, a tool of empire, for as long as people have been fighting with each other. And Aleister Crowley he was a Renaissance man in a dark kind of sense. Like he played in those realms of like the military and global politics and drugs and trafficking when it was still kind of above board.
Yeah, Lusitania is World War I, just to confirm you on that, because the
Thank
World
you.
War II story I really enjoy is that bizarre magical battle with Rudolf Hess. Um,
Thank
I,
you.
I
Yeah, that
I want to see that as a movie. I mean, come on.
yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. That's another one that's really interesting. Yeah, he was fighting on the side of England and the United States in a magical war against the Nazis. I mean, they were essentially using this kind of counter propaganda to like, because they knew that Hitler was very fascinated with astrology and having readings and oracles and using divination to plan his battles and whatnot. So they thought that if they had a guy like Crowley who seemingly knew everything about it, all there was to know about the esoteric in that realm, they were able to use him and his knowledge to kind of create a false narrative through which Adolf planned his attacks, but without real causality because he was given false information. So to me, that indicates that the military, the governments, they recognize that there is power to this stuff. So that means Aleister Crowley wasn't just some shamster, because if they really like were worried that Adolf was, I mean, maybe that's losing sight of it, but the point is that Adolf, was sidetracked by the propaganda that Aleister Crowley was able to spin up in this kind of mystic sort of way. That's what they knew Adolf would be interested in. And then as the war unraveled and things got deeper and deeper, this magical battle took place where apparently they convinced Rudolph Hess to take a airplane, and meet Aleister Crowley for a battle in Scotland. And obviously it was all a trap. Crowley was never waiting for him in any field. And when Rudolph Hess landed, he had all of these like magical sigils emblazoned on a parachute outfit, like a jumpsuit, and was quickly captured by the authorities, Crowley not even needing to be there. And then I'm almost certain, it could be wrong about this, that he was involved with the interrogation of Rudolf Hess in some way, if not other members of the National Socialists of Germany, because these people, they Hitler, Adolf Hitler was very fascinated with the occult. I mean, empires since the beginning of time, again, very fascinated with these occult practices because there is power in them. So when Adolf planned this trip to India and he went to the Himalayas and he went, to Egypt, he wasn't just taking vacation, folks. He was trying to take as much knowledge as he could around the world and compile it into this sort of new religion that, I mean, ultimately failed. But I mean, I'm not willing to get into that too deeply because I'm not really knowledgeable too much on the National Socialists and Adolf, but I do know that that's primarily why Crowley was involved, was because the occult was something that both sides, the Allies and the Axis, were using to gain a military advantage over their enemy.
I've still been waiting for one of those wish.com pop-ups to offer me my Enochian coat. Although I don't know, you probably don't actually want to go around wearing those symbols. They do offer overpriced Luciferizing jackets, but that's another thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the Enoch stuff is also very interesting. I mean, for those who aren't aware, another really interesting figure that Crowley was familiar with, practiced with, or at least was inspired by, Eliphas Levi, right? And he did this kind of Enochian ritual with him to create the language of the angels through which they can communicate with higher entities and whatnot. And people can go and find that book, and it just kind of looks like a bunch of flowery scribbles. And if you try, you can try to like write words out in this language that they created, but it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I one thing this doc did that I thought was a little weird was I think they straight out say like, Enochian magic is communicating with demons. I'm saying there wasn't John Dee and his buddy trying to communicate with angels.
Right. That's what it was. I think it was John D. and Eliphas Leve, not Aleister Crowley, but he was Aleister afterwards was very inspired by that and took it under his own wing and worked with Enochian magic. But you're absolutely right; it's the language of the angels, not the language of demons. But that's how modern, secular Christianity colors anything occult or esoteric as a demon.
Especially the BBC, I suppose, keep that stiff upper lip and throw everything out the door.
Right.
But yeah, like you're saying, maybe they're painting the strokes a little bit too broadly here. I mean, Crowley, a fascinating man, but yeah, he's a pretty gnarly dude. He's not someone you want to invite to your party unless you're expecting your party to get like, super wild.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was really like, he had a really poor reputation with the people that knew him deeply, like on an intimate level. He was known to, be an abusive partner and take advantage of people, and obviously more than just an egomaniac, somewhat of a megalomaniac in the sense that his actions were truly kind of mega, right? I mean, someone who's an egomaniac might be as crazy as him, but not have as much impact. But he actually had an impact on the world. And even though, we can say, yeah, he was a narcissist, he was this, he was that, he's all these bad things. I always at my own risk, at my own expense every time, because people hate me when I do this. I always give Aleister Crowley credit for exposing some of these spiritual things to the public. I mean, the amount of books he wrote is pretty incredible for the subject that he was writing about. It's just there aren't many similar authors. I mean, I would say Manly P. Hall is a better source of that sort of information than Aleister Crowley, more detailed, more in depth. But again, Manly P. Hall came sometime after Aleister Crowley, but
That secret teaching of
contemporary
the
still.
secret teaching of the Asian Asians. Well, I live in Asia. The ancients. Also, that is a monster of a book.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of the most pivotal books in my life that I've ever read. I mean, the Aleister Crowley books that I own were not really that pivotal to me, honestly, because they're dense, they're hard to understand. He writes within the context of his life, and he didn't really put much thought, I think, into making the work super accessible. Right? Like it requires a certain amount of initiation to understand certain parts of his books, but there are things that are fairly easy and approachable. But I will say that owning his book, Aleister Crowley Magic Liber 4, it was, kind of a magnet of weird activity when I took it out in public. I've talked about this on other podcasts, but one time I had it at work and this crazy guy came into this cafe I worked at the time and did this weird like bible ritual, like writing in the middle of the bible, scribbling with like an electric candle. Didn't buy a coffee, so I go over and I'm like, hey man, you got to buy a coffee before you can do some black magic in our cafe. And he gets all mad at me and mentions Aleister Crowley's name when he's buying a coffee, and the book was like under the counter. There's no way he could have saw it. So it's just so strange that, like, okay, the one day I bring this crazy weird book to a public place, this guy comes, floats on over. So it's definitely, he's a source of something, man. He definitely tapped into something powerful. Crowley did.
How do you invoke Crowley when ordering a coffee? Is that what, like, by Crowley I'll have a latte? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, he was just so mad. He was mad that I called him out for not buying a coffee, and then he tried to he was obviously schizophrenic or something. 'Cause he tried to like intimidate me by saying like I'm the seventh son of Aleister Crowley and Charles Manson is my father, and I'm being haunted. Like it was weird. It was like he was trying to scare me by telling me he was possessed. I don't know how that would have scared me, but uh, I'm pretty confident in my spiritual beliefs. But he didn't know that.
Yeah. I guess we get the sometimes, well, not always, but sometimes we get the more innocuous version of crazy here in Japan. Just my last crazy experience. I take trains to work and stuff. So I'm at the train platform. It's the middle of the day. There's some guy 20, too old to be doing this, but not that old, just walking up and down the platform, like mimicking the train announcements. The next day I come, there's another guy doing it, and the next week they're like competing. They're like on different train platforms trying to do the train announcements louder than the other. So
Like miming them or actually saying them?
actually saying them, they're just walking up and down like, Mamanaku Shinonoi Eki, yes, which just means we're approaching Shinonoi Station.
Wow.
So
Very interesting. See, now this is why I brought Jay here because we're really interested in what's going on over there in Japan. I don't want to divert off the subject too much, but I mean Crowley, he went to Asia. Have you ever looked into his time in Asia at all? I don't know
oh,
if he was in Japan though. I think he might have just went to like places in China and Southeast Asia.
I'm pretty sure he passed through Japan, but I don't think he had like a particularly long stay. And I could be completely wrong about that as well. Um,
Yeah.
I guess the magical vibe here. I'm in the mountains in the center of Japan, so it's a Nagano, but the traditional title around here is like Shinshu, which is Pure Land, and it contains a temple that has the first image of Buddha that was in Japan, which nobody
Wow.
can see. I think only the high priestess, they have a priestess there, can see it. And every 7 years, they'll have a big festival at the temple and let you see a copy of the statue or the image, but you can't see the real thing.
Really? That's like the that's like the drawing of Muhammad almost. You can't
Yeah,
draw him. You can't. Nobody can see what he looks like. Well, I guess it makes sense in that sense. Of like you don't want to have idol worship. Maybe I don't know. That's interesting though.
uh, for listeners or for yourself or anyone who ends up, this is the Zen Koji temple. Another fun thing it has is behind the main temple area you can go underground. It's pitch black, and you walk the circuit, and in the middle of the circuit, you're supposed to find a kind of, it's like a switch or a metal handle. Of course, I haven't seen it; it's pitch black. So, but the idea is if you go to this temple, you gain the temple's enlightenment by finding this handle somewhere in the
Yeah.
darkness.
All right. So it's just there. Do people are people allowed to go look for it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now a real groovy day, is like a weekday. There's nobody there, and you're doing it by yourself. That's when it does have a little more of a spiritual,
Now, when
feel to
people
it.
find the handle, do they like get excited and shout or something? Like, what do you do when you find it?
Yeah,
Or do
yeah.
you
Like,
just never find it?
oh, you find it. You can find it. You just need to keep feeling on the wall as you walk. So on a weekday, you're there by yourself. There actually is, a nice spiritual component. If you go on a Saturday, you're in a line of giggling tourists and stuff. So, you'll
Ah,
you'll hear kids going like "Ata, ata," So it's not so enlightening when you do it that way. So
yeah, yeah,
still
I get.
fun.
Yeah, wow, Nagano,
Bunch of
very
people
cool.
stumbling through the dark looking for enlightenment. It's a
Yeah,
fun line to be in. Um, uh, we can go on any tangents about Japan, but just one big thing I wanted to get on the Crowley is we were talking about the Golden Dawn, the climbing, kind of cool stuff, right? The earlier, maybe publicly we don't know that he abandoned his mountaineering team or that he'd been having his way with the maid. So it seems his evening in the Great Pyramid seems to be that turning point. We get the Book of Law from his wife and stuff. But I am sitting here wondering if he had not had that, if he would have over the next 20 years, built himself into like a Victorian age Eckhart Tolle or something, and then just had a bunch of scandals in the 30s when all this stuff came to light.
yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. He left the Abramelin ritual, unfinished, which was like this long, arduous process, multiple months of ritual. He meets this woman, Rose Kelly, stops doing the ritual, runs away with her. They go to Egypt, and she's kind of like hanging along at his side, like not really understanding what they're doing, but he's like, listen, like, I need you for this. Like, you're gonna be a part of this, like, you're the conduit, that God is going to speak through you, So days go by and she's like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know what to expect. And he's like, trust me, like, I know it. Horace is here. He's going to talk to us. He's going to talk to us through you. So eventually something gives way, and a being named Iwas, spelled out with like multiple I's and A's and a W and S's, is very like, it doesn't look like a normal word. It looks like it's spelled phonetically, so you can be like Iwas, like it's very weird word. But apparently Iwas, you know, relayed this information, channeled it through Rose, and then that became the Book of the Law, and that was in the Great Pyramid. And people probably romanticize it and maybe portray her as like his willing, cute little like magician's assistant or something, but she really like had no idea what was going on, and I think he might have even been intentional in that sense of like, he didn't want her to lead the information with anything, so he kept her in the dark, in the sense so like she could be a perfect channel and there wouldn't be any bias at all. But he was also a very manipulative and controlling person by all accounts. So like, he enjoyed putting someone in that kind of position where like, oh, like, you don't know anything and I know everything, and just wait, like, oh, trust me, wait, and I think he really took pleasure in bringing people down that kind of experience. And that's probably why he was so compelled to start his own order, Oriental Templi Orientis, or Order Templi Orientis, the OTO. And that ultimately became something that I think he was kicked out of by the people that joined in, because he didn't really live a very uh, ordered life. It was a very chaotic life, and his romantic occasions, like the one at the pyramid, it was supposed to be their honeymoon, but he's out there at the Great Pyramid trying to channel some spirits. So he was a very focused person in the sense that he had like this one purpose and nothing got in the way of that, but he definitely used the people around him to get certain steps ahead.
Sounds like a hell of a debauched honeymoon. Is they call it a debauched honeymoon in this documentary a few times, but and yeah, the pickup line in a party. I guess he actually used it, which most of us don't have the guts to do. Hey babe, you're gonna help me bring on the Aeon of Horus. What's that mean?
Yeah, what's that like in Japan? Are they what's the dating life like?
Oh, I'm married. I'm living in a house here with I got an 11-year-old daughter. That said, I was talking to Brad Olson last week.
Oh
We were
yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
We had him on the show too.
Yeah, I think that's why I invite him. To be honest, I steal your booking sometimes, man. After you've booked them, but he had been here in Japan like in the '90s, and he was like talking about how I was being a playboy, and then people were like, the term sensei actually carries some respect, and it's like, oh, maybe I should like tone it down a little bit, but now it does depend if you're like in Tokyo or Osaka, or you're like in the countryside or something. Like the co-host for sometimes here, and I do sci-fi movies with him, and when he first moved here a few years ago, he had a steady sweetie, but now he's rolling the dice. We had our vacation week um a few weeks ago, and he was going to go to Osaka to go meet another lady, but then the state of emergency sort of put the kibosh on all that.
uh Yeah, yeah. No, I only asked because you're right. He was kind of like he was confident. He did date a lot of women, Aleister Crowley. But I wonder how he would do in Japan. I wonder how I would do in Japan. Jay, I know Jay wants to get out to Japan and meet some Japanese ladies. That's his fetish.
Get out of here, Mark.
No,
Get
I'm
out of
just
here
kidding.
with
That's
that.
that's inappropriate. No human being should be fetishized. I take that back, social justice warriors.
Yeah. Um, I guess the thing in Japan, it's very easy to get talking to someone. If when I was in my 20s and playing in the field, I'd find, because in America, there's we talk about like the friend zone. Usually, if a lady's talking to you, she's at least mildly interested. Now, establishing a relationship, you might find yourself like within 2 weeks having someone getting real serious about you as well, or finding out that, hey, this isn't working at all. So. Um,
So
my
quick to commit or quick to bail sounds like.
Yeah. Like my first relationship in Japan, and here I'll actually tag myself out as having a um, basically she was 8 years. She was very attractive, but 8 years older than me, and I could never get over that.
Yeah.
you
Oh
know,
man.
I have another guy. I think he ended up. Yeah, he's married. He has a kid with a lady 10 years older than him. So it wasn't his problem. But yeah, I guess if something doesn't sit well with you, it's not going to sit well with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we like I said, Jay and I are super interested in Japan. Jay more so than me, but I would love to go. I mean, do you have any advice for folks who might want to travel out there?
And it's hard to say in COVID times, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, I haven't traveled anywhere for quite some time. Um, I'd say, people want to see Tokyo, of course, but that's like calling New York City all of America. It's a real different scene once you get out. Um, for me, I like hiking. I got into podcasts basically because I just started walking all the time. I'm listening to stuff walking through rice fields at midnight and stuff. So I'm into
Very
just
cool.
strolling through the mountains. We live in a valley, so the guy that does the sci-fi podcast and myself, we can just look at a mountain and say, "I'm walking up that today," and kind of doing that. So it's fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man. So you're out, like you said, you're in the sort of central area, the Pure Land is what it's called.
Yeah, yeah,
Nagano.
yeah. That'd be the
Very cool.
translation. And that one actually was weird. I didn't even know that, and I was walking before I started listening to podcasts. I was just playing like Alan Watts recordings, right? And I'm
Yeah.
walking. That's where I learned. He's like, "Shouldn't you? Pure Land. There's a place where." And I'm like, "Wait, I'm walking in that place right now. That's trippy."
Yeah, yeah, dude. Alan Watts is a big part of me kind of reaching this point where I'm at now. But yeah, Alan Watts and some good acid, that's a great way to spend the day.
Yeah. No, Japan. That is one thing. Japan. We really don't get any of that. So, but hey, that's part of where I started getting more like, I guess, spiritual or meditational. I'm like,
Right.
I want to
No, and you
trip
know
out.
what? Yeah, no, and there is something about being in a certain landscape that is intoxicating in and of itself. So you might not even really need that to have whereas like if you're living in like a depressed New York City cityscape, hellscape, you're like, you need some acid to realize what spirituality is again. It sounds like when you walk around Tokyo or at least where you are, not Tokyo, Japan, there's sort of a spiritual atmosphere at play.
One of my buddies in Tokyo, he's Australian, and he's like, I wish I was more into like mycology, because if you go up
Mm,
these mountains, you would find, you if you knew what you were looking for, you could probably find some pretty interesting mushrooms here and there.
yeah.
You see
Massive
some of the,
mushrooms or just strange mushrooms? Because I couple maybe last year, a couple months ago in fall, I was walking and I found a mushroom. I mean, almost the size of my wingspan, and I'm 6'8". So like this is 7 feet almost wingspan, and it was almost that big around, like 6 feet is how big this turkey tail mushroom was. I mean, it could have been multiple turkey tails and like it just grew on top of itself, but it was like, I mean, is that what we're talking about here? Japanese mushrooms?
yeah, I mean, because they had some of that stuff going on, not like they wouldn't, like, Siberia and those Santa caps or whatever, but in Japan, it was actually they were perfectly legal till about 2002, 2003. They had the World Cup, and I think they were worried that, like, at that time, that there was no legalization anywhere, right? So they were kind of concerned the international community would like look down on the fact that you could still trip out on mushrooms there. Again, my Australian buddy's a little older than me. He came a few years earlier and had a couple years where he could like legally do that. So
Really?
again, there's no moral issue, right? It's just like, is it legal? Is it illegal? Marijuana was, you could buy it in drugstores until after World War II, and we've got to put the blame on that on MacArthur. The Japanese themselves weren't like, we want to make it illegal. MacArthur made it illegal for them while he was for the couple of years he was basically running the show.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I've heard that marijuana is not really bueno in Japan. Like they don't, they're strict. But I don't know how true. I never knew how true that was. But the whole Super Mario mushroom connection. Some people say like, oh yeah, those Nintendo guys, they were tripping out on mushrooms. That's why there's all these Mario mushrooms in the Mario game.
I don't know if they were or not, but in the 80s, yeah, they could have been, and no one would have had a problem with it. So
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, dude, this Aleister Crowley stuff, it's very interesting, but I feel like I'd be down to do more episodes like this where you send me a cool documentary like on other things. I mean, Crowley's definitely someone I've studied often, but yeah, this is fun, man. I appreciate you having me on so far. Did we finish off on the Crowley stuff too soon? We can get back into that. I don't want to get too sidetracked on Japan. Did you have more to say about Crowley?
not so much to say about Crowley. I'll kind of like have a run over my notes one more time, but I did want to ask, and I'll throw this question to both of you. If you had the Great Pyramid to yourself for the night, what would you do? Would you take the opportunity?
Jay?
uh, I'd create some type of electricity current to see if it's really to see if it's really conductive, like they say.
So Jay would try to turn the pyramid on.
Turn the
Exactly.
pyramid on. Yeah, that sounds a little racy.
Come on.
And that's what I would try to do. I would try to turn the pyramid on. No. If I had one night in the pyramid, I mean, I'd probably just be extremely grateful. I hope that happens one day. Wishful thinking. But yeah, I would just probably, as corny as this sounds, meditate and just be present and just be grateful because I know it isn't something that anyone really gets a chance to do. So I would be extremely grateful. And I think in that feeling, you would probably connect with something higher than yourself. So that's where I would go, as cheesy as it sounds.
In the sarcophagus, in the sarcophagus or outside the sarcophagus?
I would go as high up as possible. I would be at like the cap of the pyramid. I
Oh,
wouldn't Yeah, I wouldn't want to
skip the
be like
chamber.
underground. First of all, I'm like I said, I'm very tall, so I don't think I could fit in all those chambers comfortably. I don't know. Maybe they're huge. Maybe some of them are small, but like I would try to be on top of the pyramid as much as possible.
And I was thinking, yeah, my thought is you'd meditate too. I'd want to see if I'd open that, astral door into somewhere else, like, um,
Right.
but now that I think about what I'd probably start doing, because I was noticing watching the guy going through in here, there'd be about 10 minutes just echo, echo. But if you watch that scene in the dock again, listen to the echoes that are coming through. I don't know if it's a sound equipment, but it doesn't really quite sound like what he's saying being echoed back.
Really
Yeah, just
interesting.
I mean, I was watching this last night with a drink in hand, so keep that in mind too. But I was like just really paying attention. He'd say something like, in the king's chamber, and I'd hear like, it just was like it
Yeah, no, I
like
didn't catch on to that, but I wouldn't doubt it, given the strange dimensions of the building itself, that there would be some odd acoustics at play. Yeah.
And then that leads me to think if I did get more serious, maybe because at first I was like, I do like my normal kind of meditation, I kind of do at temples. That is one thing. I work in a suburban school now, so there's like 5 temples I can hit. They kind of have different personalities. That's what I do for my lunch break. But in the pyramid, yeah, I guess I'd really want to get into the sound meditation, just since
Mm.
it seems like a real good place for that.
Yeah, yeah, really be centered. We had a woman who's become a friend to me, who lives up in Alaska. She's a really cool chick. She's a sound healer. I'd be curious. Maybe there's a documentary you two could watch together. But yeah, she's really cool. She talked about sound healing on her first appearance on our show, episode 5, I think, or 6, episode 6. But yeah, that the amount of science that's actually out there about the real nature of sound is quite incredible. Like, have you seen the in Japan, Masaru Emoto studies, like the of what certain words can do to freezing water? I mean, these temples also have similar beneficial effects. Like, there's a video I watched on Instagram, I think a couple weeks ago. Someone showed me where this woman was playing some sort of instrument in a temple, and the water was like creating all these patterns. It had something in it to like give dimension to it, but it was very, very interesting, the sacred geometry.
Yeah, I want to say that's I've heard it referred to as structured water, or 4D
That could
phase
be it.
water. Um,
Yeah, Dr. Dana Cohen, Quench 4D water. That's something people should look up because it's very, very interesting to know that there's a fourth state of water.
and one big plus we have up here in the mountains that Tokyo doesn't have is all the hot springs.
Mm.
Um, like I can go before work. So yesterday I did. They got a sauna, so I got sort of the hot cold thing, right? They got a cold bath, hot
Yeah.
bath. They got the volcanic water, and this is one of the older ones in Japan. So it's supposed to be pretty good water, and I'm just wondering if that's structured. They have like signs of like the chemical composition of this water. It tends to be more sulfuric. A lot of it, especially in this area, when you come out, it almost feels like your skin has like this weird quicksilver quality when you come out for at least a few minutes.
Quicksilver. Do you mean like slick, kind of like
Yeah, I
when
mean
rubber's
slick.
wet?
Yeah, slick, not not like a mercury spill or something.
Yeah, I immediately thought of the Silver Surfer for some reason, like shooting through the sky on a surfboard.
That's not the wrong thought, but yeah, just like that's kind of weird because usually we have a little friction when we run our hand along our arm or something like that. So
Yeah, are there's snow monkeys up there, or am I thinking of further north?
oh, you're this is definitely the right place. The snow monkeys, I think they're about 50 kilometers, which like 35 miles from here. So yeah. When my parents have visited or friends, we'll take them up there. That's kind of fun. You have to hike in. There's a monkey onsen, a monkey hot spring, basically. So you park your car, or you take a bus up there, I suppose. It's about a 30-minute hike, and you come to this place. You buy a cheap ticket, and you go in, and you're just walking among the monkeys, so they can attack you if they want to. I guess they're used to people, but
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen that. And it kind of plays into something I've been thinking about a lot, is because apparently the theory is that not all of those um, monkeys knew how to kind of use the hot springs, in the sense of like they didn't really like interact with them much. And there's these different groups of monkeys on the islands that were not, communicating with each other, obviously separated geographically. And somewhere or another, these scientists that were studying them found that when one group of monkeys began to learn like what they can do in the hot springs, the isolated regions of monkeys fell in line with that new thing. And there was like this instinctual kind of learning that went on, even though there wasn't any kind of physical interaction. And this is a part of Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic theory, that animals and plants are connected to this consciousness matrix where ideas in one point place in time can ripple outwards and have an effect on other conscious beings. And I think we see that in certain primates with the learning aspect. They take on all these different tools and do these different things to advance themselves. And I mean, maybe I'm getting too biological. I'm not really a scientist, but that I thought that was interesting.
no, I was actually going to tie that back in with the whole Crowley vibe a little bit. Just the idea, I mean, his magic with a K or whatever, sex magic, she has it, sex magic, all that stuff, right? But I mean, that's traumatic magic. Okay, there we go. Like you participate in that and you come out like, oh, you need all these ceremony, you need all these accoutrements. Whereas the monkeys, they're in tune with whatever quantum fields are there. I mean, that's what a meditator would be trying to do, right? Just get in touch with the field. You're not traumatizing anyone or anything like that. The Crowley dictum, "Do what thou wilt." I mean, it makes him sound like an asshole. So I like add to that and make it my personal credo: "Do what thou wilt, but don't be an asshole."
Yeah. No, amen. I definitely agree with that. I think, what's interesting about what you just pointed out there is like the items, the tools, the physical objects that are used in these sort of magical rituals. It's important to notice what you just said there. I mean, why they use these items is because it creates, and this is something Joe Roop talked to Jay and I about. It creates this framework that your mind remembers, so that when you go into the astral realm, these really potent symbols that you have in front of you in your living waking life carry over into the astral realm, and that helps facilitate your lucidity, and helps initiates who go through this process begin to wake up when they're sleeping and actually begin to do beneficial dream work, work that progresses their alchemical evolution, their spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, I've kind of found just for myself, because I've actually managed a little bit of that a few times. Kind of wanting to have a lucid dream and doing it a little bit by accident, and then learning, oh, this actually is a thing. And
Yeah.
so the daytime meditation, that's like a Zen thing, just like on a real good meditation. I usually meditate during my lunch break, and if I come out, I have a count, so it should be the same time. But sometimes, like, has it been 5 hours? Did I just miss my classes? And the timing worked out. So I'm like, oh, that was successful. I actually lost all track of time and space for a few moments there. So success. And other days you're sitting there thinking about after I'm finished meditating, what Amazon search I'm going to do. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
found,
No.
yet that early morning thing, I guess you got the DMT accessible in your head. And that 3 a.m. or for me, it's usually a 5 or 6 a.m. wake up call. I mean, maybe that's a plus here that we don't do daylight savings time. So the sun is coming out like 4:30 in the morning right now. So
Now, do you think that, living in that life escape of time where there isn't that kind of truncation of time into daylight savings, for whatever weird reason they explain that whole thing, do you think that that's had a different effect on your life? I mean, do you think that you're able to have a more consistent rhythm to your life because of that?
yeah, and here's one reason why. And this actually, because we're pretty urban in America, right? So people don't notice so much. But I actually I get off one or two train stations early to get some exercise. I used to weigh like 93 kilos. Try and keep walking a lot. That's like 210 pounds, I think. But I'm
Yeah, that
walking
just
around.
went right over our head. Could you tell that we have no idea what kilos are, Jay?
Yeah, sorry, that's about
Oh.
210 pounds.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, you don't look it at all, I gotta say. If
oh
you
no,
told
no,
me
no,
you,
no. I've gotten down to 79.
it's awesome.
By not living in America, by walking a lot and that sort of thing. By cutting
Congrats.
down on my drinking is not one of them. But what do you do? you
Well,
gotta
maybe they have
improvise.
healthier. I would imagine they might have healthier booze in Japan. There's probably less fluoride in the alcohol out there.
Yeah, actually, I only drink one thing. To be honest, drinking alcohol now basically gives me a headache. Something like Nihonshu, Japanese sake, and beer, instant wine, especially instant headache feel. So the only thing I drink is and this sounds so hipster, but you can buy it in the convenience stores here. It's Chuhai, which is it's just vodka and shochu and some fruit juice. And yeah, I
Ah,
prefer to
okay.
get the one that has no sugar added when possible. So
So wait, can you say the name of that again? Because that's like the Japanese White Claw, right?
I guess so. Chuhai, that's CHU dash HI if you're writing it
Too high.
in
Okay.
English. So that's the only thing I drink. But yeah, I like drinking Chuhai. So
All
it's like
right.
the Fantastic Mr. Fox, where the guy just has a cider every night. That I guess that's me now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now I'm realizing you've been in Japan, so you probably don't even know that White Claw is like super popular. It's like what you just described. Do you not know? I mean, everybody's drinking it in the past year. I've noticed this vodka seltzer flavored fruit drinks are like crazy popular. So you're not. I don't think you're hipster at all, actually.
Okay. Although in Japan we do get the nice the less sugar version. I'm guessing the White
Yeah,
Claw is
I bet.
like a some sugar water and some vodka, right? Which you can get those versions here as well, but I try to avoid them most of the time. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
Jay
no,
and I, we're into the New England IPA, to be honest. I can't speak for Jay. His alcohol taste is much more diverse than mine, but I'm not a fan of the White Claws. So maybe I'll try a Chew High, though. This sounds interesting.
It
you know
sounds good.
20.
I just looked it up. Looks like a enticing can.
Oh yeah, they got good marketing in Japan. So
Jay loves Japanese culture. You don't have to sell him very hard on the labels.
no, my big IPA, not so much IPA as just the microbrews was about 20 years ago. I was being more of a proper hippie and teaching environmental education. It was a Saco, Maine. So we'd run into Portland, Maine and hit up all the pubs and try their beers. I used to have more headaches then too, but oh well. um, I guess yeah, we probably should be winding down today. I try to keep these under an hour because for kind of the headier podcast, you got what the higher side goes for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
The conspiracy guys, I hope you have your day empty.
Well,
and
you get 2 hours if you're a plus member. Are you also a plus member of the higher side chats, Matt?
yeah. That's one
Okay.
where
Well,
I've been
very
giving the
cool.
man his dime for quite a while because hey, I'll plug that show. It's usually worth hearing that second one. So for now, I mean this is the operation, man. So
Yeah, no, I would just point that out though, because it's cool. I love meeting people who are also plus members because I think Greg does such a unique job at making a brilliant show. Like there's so many shows that touch on those topics, but the way he does it is pretty brilliant. So it's cool. Yeah, I think that there's a connection here as far as like when you told me it was a documentary podcast, I wasn't sure what to think. I probably should have listened to a few episodes before I said yes, but I'm not afraid to say yes to anything. So I was like, hell yeah. But I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. I love talking to you, man. You're definitely on top of a lot of things that I claim to know about. And, this seems like Oral Hygiene is a great listen. I got to check it out.
yeah, one of the things is I it's I'm have the full oversight now. So originally it was just an excuse. I was already doing the sci-fi film podcast. I got a good friend in Atlanta. I was like, let's podcast about something. And we just do a couple every Tuesday morning, every other week. We'll do 2 episodes. And it was just a chance to talk to your old buddy, right? Have a good time, get into some
Mm-hmm.
films. Then I was like, oh, Friday, I got some other people I can talk to. And then last month, I was like, so we're doing educational films mostly and experimental ones. And I used to say weird documentaries. I switched it to like interesting documentaries because I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe I want some of the filmmakers to come talk to me, and I don't want to call them weird, at least
Yeah,
not directly.
Yeah, that's smart. I would recommend because maybe just because we just had Birch Driver on our show, we just did an interview with him. We talked about Buckminster Fuller the whole time, and there's some really interesting stuff about that guy. If you can dig up a documentary about him, you can definitely. I would love to put you in touch with Birch because you guys could have a great conversation there. And then another really interesting rabbit hole that you might not have gone down yet is there's this YouTube series that I got into called Defunct Land. It's all
Oh,
about,
trust me, that one
you know about it?
and
Yeah.
they've gotten an invite from this podcast, not responded to yet, but that's okay. Sometimes you try a few times,
Yeah, isn't that great though? That whole series is so interesting. You can't call it a documentary, but the whole thing is like documentary.
Yeah. In fact, so if you want to hear one of our shows, I released last week because Saturday or Sunday is now my guest slot. My
Okay.
coworkers like, why are you doing so many podcasts? I'm like, oh, I just roll out of bed and talk to someone. But if you want a defunct land vibe, I posted last week Monsanto's House of the Future, and
Yeah.
I brought in Charlie Robinson for that one, so you could just rant on Monsanto for a while.
Dude, I mean, this is synchronicity because I was literally watching that World's Fair video and got in. Like, I really was compelled, like, whoa, Monsanto, Disney, there's the connection. That's why Monsanto's just weaseled its way into everything. And then when I dug a little deeper, I was at this bookstore and I found like a Chicago World's Fair book. And, I started digging through that and found some cool stuff. But yeah, I definitely want to check that out, man. Anything in that realm like Tartaria, Lost History, if you find anything like that, please keep me in mind because I'd love to come back and do another one of these.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, what I try to do is I mean, there might be a point where I do a more like recent YouTube video, but I'll try to go like as vintage as possible. So for my Monsanto,
Cool.
we wouldn't even have to watch the video, but it's basically a 1957 promotional film. Like if you really
Yeah.
want to learn about it, yeah, going and watching Defunct Lands documentary is probably smarter, but it's Aural Hygiene. We got the weird artwork. I'm like, I want to keep it as vintage as possible. So for today,
Yeah.
Crowley, I was like, 2003. That seems vintage enough for
Well, they did use a lot of vintage source material in that documentary. I will say, like the audio files of Crowley actually talking. That's cool stuff. I don't know if you could just find that with a traditional search engine.
I did try and induce nightmares or something a few years. I was probably trying to induce lucid dreams, but I went to sleep listening to his recording of reading the Book of Law once, which now I don't
Oh
think I do
man,
that. I don't think I do that now, to be honest. I'd find something else, but I don't think
yeah,
anything particularly happened from that. So
yeah. I would recommend anybody who's interested in Crowley proceed with caution because it's not that just reading it will become dangerous to you. It's just like, do you really want to invite that energy into your life? There's other places to find that information now. Maybe in the 1950s it would have been groundbreaking, but there are better sources. I would say go to Israel Regardie if you want to learn about Aleister Crowley. He's a great author.
yeah, I've seen a few of those books. But I mean, the one thing I have people like, oh, you should put a meditation app on your phone or something like that. And like I said before, for me, kind of the key is to keep it like needing nothing as much as possible is more, and it's harder work and it takes years, Like I can look back now. I'd say the past 5 years is when I started like putting my brain on track. Before that, I was lucky. I'd hear the voice of intuition or from beyond, and I mean I think that's how I ended up in Japan. And I make music, so I music before that. I was like, hey, sometimes I'm like, why did I write those lyrics? I'm like actually teaching myself. That's crazy. But the past 5 years, I
Yeah.
can look back 5 years ago. This coworker is always annoying me, and there's this problem, and why are these people in front of me? And yeah, just life gets slicker and slicker. So, it takes a while. Again, it's not a traumatic instant sort of, oh, something happened. It's over time and you have to look back over months and years. But then you're like, hey, things are way nicer now. Nothing's changed. I have the same job. I'm living in the same house, but everything's better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, uh, are you saying that because you've done the podcast that long, you have the foresight? Is that what you're saying? Maybe I
No,
lost
oh
what you.
no, I'm talking about being more like starting meditation practice
Ah, yes, yes, yes,
and
yes,
like
yes. Being
looking,
present.
being present and dealing with people and those sort of things. The last time I actually chewed someone out was about a year and a half ago, which was actually my boss. But and as soon as I saw it happening, and I as soon as after I apologized and said I think the reason is because I was like I spent 5 hours in the hospital yesterday for a really embarrassing thing, and there's something that may or may not be bleeding at the moment. So you're a little more touchy at that point in time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure.
And since then,
Wow.
I haven't really had a row with anyone, which is nice. I've been podcasting about a year and a half, actually getting guests on for a year and going solo with guests only for the past month. So,
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, we're kind of similar, I guess. Jay and I have been podcasting since like 2019, but the first podcast we did was like pretty lame and not a lot of people saw it on YouTube. And I didn't even know what a podcast host was back then. So I just like thought YouTube was the best way to go because I couldn't figure it out. And so then we started My Family Thinks I'm Crazy in October, and it's been going strong since. We've had guests since episode one. I've had a guest on every time, but the first three were like buddies, not like actual proper guests. But yeah, it's really cool connecting with you, man. I think that's one of the awesome things about podcasting is like now Jay and I learned a little bit about Japan. We learned about you. You got to learn what I know about Crowley, and all the listeners learned all of that and more. And yeah, man, I'd love to have you on my show to talk about how you got out to Japan, and like maybe some more of the stuff that makes you, you know, get into why you do this podcast and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. This sort of time slot's always good for me. I guess we
Cool.
should wrap it up for today. Can you tell people how to get to your podcast and what you're up
Yeah.
to?
Yeah, if people are listening, you can go to www.myfamilythinksimcrazy.com. If you're listening from a desktop or your phone or your tablet, we're on all of those. Go to the browser. Or if you prefer apps, we're on all the apps. You could just search myfamilythinksimcrazy.com. I prefer Podcast Addict. If you're listening on Spotify right now, we are losing money. So please go to a different app. And then, Jay, do you want to plug your band, dude?
Oh, why not, Mark?
Jay's a drummer.
All right.
Check out Mighty Tortuga, all platforms.
Okay. Yeah, you're Mighty Tortuga.
Yes,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Spanish for turtle.
Oh, okay. There we go. No, you're talking to a guy that has 7 guitars and an electric cello with a real one
hell
downstairs.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So then we definitely got to have you on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. You and Jake can talk about music. We'll get into some conspiracy stuff. Obviously, Charlie's been on my show too. So we're already having similar guests and stuff. So yeah, we got to make that happen, man. It's been really fun. And yeah, thanks for letting us promote our stuff.
Yeah, great. As for this one, this is Aural Hygiene. It's it's at Twitter, Facebook, and I need to actually look up the name. Right now, we have several of our podcasts running under Podcastius. My co-host came up with that. He was trying to come up with the dumbest name possible, but maybe it's memorable. Podcastius. You know, when we got some money flowing, and maybe I'll buy a mic stand. This is my vocal mic for making music.
Not bad.
No, and it's just your arm gets tired after a while, right?
Yeah, that makes. I'm always like rolling a blunt or smoking a blunt, so I had to have this all figured out because my hands need to be free when I'm doing this.
No, it's been many years since someone handed me a blunt, though I'd be perfectly happy if someone did hand me one. But again, trade up. You live in Japan and you make the trades, right?
Right. Not much tobacco gets out to Japan in this style.
No. And Japan tobacco, there's a racket. That's a wild one. I mean,
yeah.
For a nasty company. A good one to look into. But yeah, Japanese politics, of course, has lots of wacky stuff going on too. But definitely more milquetoast than the American variety. Okay, we will catch this at a later time then. So keep it real on your late afternoon, I guess. I'm going to work. That's 9 a.m. for me. So tomorrow.
Well, have a good day, man. Have a good Friday, bro.
Later.
Thanks for having us on, man. Nice